Welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. When you're ready to transform your sales for today's transforming market, we've got you covered with your host, the queen of cold calling and founder of Salesology, award-winning author, speaker, sales trainer, and coach, Wendy Weiss.
Hi, welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. And I'm your host, Wendy Weiss. I am the founder of Salesology, creator of the Salesology prospecting method, and I'm also known as the queen of cold calling. And today, my very special guest is Chandler Bolt. He is an investor, CEO of self-publishing.com, of Forbes 30 under 30 honoree. He is the author of 7 best-selling books, including his most recent book titled Publish. Self-publishing.com is an Inc. 5000 company. It's made the list 4 years in a row as one of the 5,000 fastest growing private companies in the United States. Chandler is also the host of the 7-Figure Principles podcast and the Self-Publishing School podcast. And through his books, his podcasts, his YouTube channels, and self-publishing.com, he's helped thousands of people write a book that grows their income, their impact, and their business. So welcome, Chandler.
Wendy, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here. I think this is such an important topic. So we're going to dive into it. But first, what's the backstory? How did you become the CEO of self-publishing.com?
Yeah, it's almost a decade now, which is hard to believe. But it started by eating my own dog food, so to speak. I wrote and published a book. Actually, a couple of them, they did pretty well. And I dropped out of school because I was tired of learning how to run a business from professors who have never ran businesses. So I'd ran multiple businesses up until that point, published a couple books, but I was a C-level English student and a college dropout with ADHD. So the least likely person to publish a book, but then found success with it. And people started asking, hey, how are you doing this? And as I'm sure many of your listeners, often from that question comes the best products, the best sales strategies, campaigns, and the best businesses. So started what is now known as self-publishing.com. And as you mentioned, yeah, we've published thousands of books since then. So we do this stuff all day, every day. And what I'm really passionate about is using a book specifically to grow your leads, sales, and referrals, which I think will be really relevant to this crew is, hey, how do you use books or a book to make the sales process easier? So that's what we've been helping people with for a long time now.
Okay. So I'm curious because my first question to you was going to be, well, why should a business owner, a CEO, entrepreneur, why should they write a book? But you kind of jumped ahead. So give us the why and give us how it helps.
It makes sales easier. I call a book a silent salesman because you create this book goes on out in the world. You give it away for free, you sell it, and it goes from one to one to one to many. And so as a business owner or as a sales leader, it's the most powerful tool, I believe. This book right here, my newest book published, will bring in about 5 to 7.5 million this year in customers for my business from the book. And so people opt into our stuff, we get more leads, people find out about the business, they close at a higher rate, at a higher average order value, all those stats that sales leaders care about. It helps all those parts of the funnel, and then it helps us get referrals because any of our customers, we say, hey, yeah, we'll just send a book to whoever you know that needs our help. And so it just makes referrals easier. So I could speak for a long time on that, but that's kind of the big picture reason why I think it's important. And if you do it well, my sales team, by the time, if someone comes from my book, that's their favorite leads because they know they're going to close because they've already read the book or at least skimmed it, that there's an increased authority, like all those things. And so that's kind of how I think about it, is how do I use it to reduce friction in the sales process and handle objections, all the things, so that by the time they get on the phone with my sales team, it's a lot easier.
I'll share a story because I launched my business with a book. I know exactly what you're talking about. And my first book came out in 2000. It was called Cold Calling for Women. It had a big pink phone on the cover. And what I found was that even just telling people that I was writing a book, I hadn't written it yet. It wasn't published. I was just writing it, but telling prospects that I was writing a book had an impact on sales.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, okay, let's say I'm a business owner. I want to write a book. I want to increase sales. Like, what's step one? What do I do? Sit down with a pen and a piece of paper?
Something like that. I would say, step one is getting super clear on what you want to write about. And preferably that's something that is, I talk about the 4 Ps of a best-selling book. So person, pain, promise, price. And all the good news is for most people here, you've probably already defined that for your business. If you haven't, you're probably not in business, or at least your sales probably aren't going very well, but you've probably defined those things. And so then based on that, you can use those things to come up with the most focused idea that either handles objections, that adds value, that's some of your best content, it's the thing that you want to be known for or are already known for, and kind of planting your flag. Now, once you've got clear on the idea, then we move into these milestones, which I know people can't see this, but we have 8 milestones. If you go to my book on Amazon, you'll see it right on the Amazon page. There's a picture. But there's 8 milestones to get your book published. The first 4 are what we call the more writing method. So mind map, so a brain dumper on all the ideas related to your topic, then outline, then rough draft, then editing. So MORE, mind map, outline, rough draft, editing. And it really starts with the brainstorm. And that's what I would encourage folks, if you're considering this, as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, just take 15 minutes, set a timer, and create a mind map. Start mind mapping the ideas that you have on this topic, the stories that you have, or for a lot of times in a sales role, it's the broken record conversations. Either you're having to educate a prospect or you're having the same objections come up over and over again. It's what are those broken record conversations that you can move from one to one to many with the book, and you start mind mapping that. And that makes the writing process a whole lot easier, which then leads to a lot faster and better book.
So you can actually, what I'm hearing, among other things that I'm hearing, but you could actually write a book that would preempt objections that you hear from prospects.
Exactly. So I'll use my book as an example, right? So if you look at the table of contents for my book, it starts with the why behind books. So exactly some of the stuff that you're asking about. Then moves into, okay, should you self-publish? Should you traditionally publish? How do you figure out what to even write about? And all in that, I'm handling objections. I talk about, hey, a lot of times people say, I don't have time to write a book, or the timing isn't right. I talk about that. Oh, who am I to write a book? I'm not an expert. I talk about that, right? So you're preemptively, I look at the job of a book, it's the job of any value-added content that you have in your sales funnel, is to build belief. So show that it's possible. So build belief, grow excitement, and practically like embed into next steps. So that's just which is like kind of objection handling. So you're building belief, you're also growing excitement, but you're handling objections in a way that leads directly into next steps. So that's how I think about any content, but especially how I think about a book. So it's very valuable, but it also is edifying, objection handling, all those things.
So why would you self-publish rather than go to a traditional publisher?
Yeah, you keep all the rights, all the royalties, all the control, and publishers don't really do that much. They're not going to market your book. You have to market the book, whether you traditionally publish or self-publish. So it's kind of an entrepreneurial form of publishing. Now, if you have a massive audience, a huge audience, and can get a big advance, then it's worth considering. Sometimes, but pretty much every other time it's worth just self-publishing for all those reasons.
Okay. So what's involved in the process? You come up with let's say you come up with this great idea for your book, and you do the mind map and everything else, and you actually start writing, then what?
Yeah, I'd say so you mind map, you outline, then you write the rough draft, then you move into editing. And now the big hang up for most people is just getting the rough draft done. We've coached literally thousands of people through this process, and that is the key point where most people get stuck before then. And so they don't get their rough draft done and they don't get their book published. And so we just seen time and time again, that's kind of the demarcation line, or the point at which, okay, it just starts to get, everything else after that gets easier. Because you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel and you start to believe that it's possible. So that's the most important part. Then you obviously move into the marketing, the launch, and all that stuff. But for most people, they never get to that point because they never focus exclusively on getting their rough draft done.
So what are some things to help people that are maybe listening to this podcast, thinking they're going to try to write a book, some things that will help them if and when they get stuck on that rough draft?
Yeah. Well, I think first off, getting super clear why you're doing it from the start. So what's the why behind this book, both personally for the business, and then having that front and center so that every time it gets hard, you see that. Because it is going to get hard, right? Writing a book is a tough process. There's a reason why, the New York Times says that 81% of people want to do it. We know that less than 1% of people actually do it. So why is there this big gap between the people who want to do it and people who actually do it? It's because it's hard, right? So you need a proven process to follow, and you need accountability to that process. And so and then among that, or alongside that, you need to remember why you're doing it. And so that's where I would say, hey, let's be super practical with that, and then follow the more writing method and play to your strengths. Like the last thing, I suspect a lot of sales leaders here, entrepreneurs, many of you are probably better at speaking than you are writing. This is a profession of talkers, right? And I'm in that same boat. So if that's you, play to your strengths. Mind map, outline the chapter, and then speak it. Get it transcribed, repeat that process chapter by chapter. So that's kind of where I think some people get hung up as, hey, I'm not a good writer, or, I'm just going to have to stare at this blank page and get this book written. But play to your strengths, whether that's writing or speaking. Be consistent, have some accountability, and a proven process to follow.
And I will share from my personal experience the epiphany that I had when I was writing my first book. My first career was I was a ballet dancer. Being a ballet dancer is all about being perfect. It's all about striving for perfection. And the epiphany I had when I was writing my very first book was it didn't have to be perfect. I just had to write it down. And taking this idea that it had to be perfect out of the mix was such a freeing experience. And that's what enabled me to write the book. And you do hire an editor. So
yes.
If it's not perfect, the editor can fix it.
Yeah. When done is better than perfect, right? I mean, you can't publish a book that's not finished.
Right.
And so get the book done. And then, yes, to your point, hire an editor to help make it better. That's a really key step.
Yeah. So how do you find these kind of resources to make your book better?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, at selfpublishing.com, this is what we do all day, every day. So we coach people through the process. We have vetted outsourcers that we use, and then we do a lot of the final mile of publishing for people in-house. So all the cover design, formatting, all that stuff. But so obviously people can work with us, or I would say two good resources is find authors that you know, or at least know of, and who did they work with. That's a really good resource. Or there's marketplaces online marketplaces and stuff that you can find editors, that you can find cover designers, stuff like that. So that's kind of that's a little bit more tactical towards the close to publishing process. But then obviously, we got a ton of free resources on our site and selfpublishing.com and all that stuff. So those would be kind of the greatest hits that I recommend people check out.
Yeah. And I know that it seems like a overwhelming thing. Oh, I'm going to write a book. But the reality is when you do it, the resources are available, and there's so many more resources than there were in 2000 when my first book came out. And it's so much easier. I remember I had to print 3,000 copies of my book because there was no print on demand. So I printed 3,000 copies and sold them, stuck them in a warehouse, and crossed my fingers I'd be able to sell them all. I did, but so the resources are out there. I think it's important to put one foot in front of the other.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And that's really the whole point of us kind of distilling it down into 8 milestones, right? And this is where a lot of people get tripped up, is they skip ahead. They start thinking, oh, what's my title? Or what's my cover going to look like? Or they just skip ahead to all these things that, kind of like I mentioned earlier, until your rough draft is done, nothing else matters. So you got the more writing method, if you got the mind map and then outline, then you're stuck on that R for a while. And it's really getting that rough draft done, and nothing else matters. And, I forget the quote or the joke. It's, you can tell when a writer's on a deadline because that's when you see them pop up on social, right? Because it's uncomfortable to write. And so oftentimes we will distract ourselves doing meaningless things that don't matter or move the needle just to shy away from the main thing that we need to actually do. It'd be the equivalent of in sales is, what do you need to do? You need to prospect, and you need to get on the phone with people. And if you do not do those things, you are not making sales. And yet so many people will do all of the other things that aren't that. Let me tinker with my LinkedIn profile, or let me, organize my office. Let me get a logo for my business, and none of those things matter. They don't move the needle. They don't make the cash register ring. So it's a very similar equivalent in getting your book done is you can't publish an unfinished book. So you got to get the rough draft done.
Hey. Well, we are going to pause now for a word from our sponsor. But when we return, I want to hold Chandler's feet to the fire about getting an ROI from all this hard work of publishing your book. How does that work? Now, a word from our sponsor, the Salesology Vault. Just about every guest that I've interviewed on the Salesology Conversations with Sales Leaders podcast has had a free gift for our listeners. And that includes my special guest today, Chandler Bolt, who is the CEO of selfpublishing.com. And what we've done is we've taken all of those gifts and we put them all together in just one place, just for you. We call it the Salesology Vault, and it's packed full of free gifts from sales leaders, sales experts, marketing gurus, revenue generation experts. And we release a podcast every week on Monday. When we release that podcast, we add a gift. So you can log in as often as you'd like, and you can download as many gifts as you'd like. It's all free. So the link to the Salesology Vault is in the show notes. As soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link. You'll be glad you did. And we are back with my special guest, Chandler Bolt, who is the CEO of selfpublishing.com. And we are talking all things, why write a book to grow your sales? So let's skip to the end. How do you get an ROI on this? You do your mind map, and you do your outline, and you get that rough draft, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do you get the ROI?
Yeah. So I look at it as 3 buckets. You use the book to get more leads, more sales, more referrals. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'll just kind of define it further. So more leads, these are people who hear about your business because of your book. And so we can all think of examples where, I didn't know about acquisition.com, but I read a book by Alex Hormozi. Or, there's hundreds more examples like that. There's many people who never knew about selfpublishing.com, but then someone recommended my book to them. So there's using a book to get more leads. There's using a book to get more sales, which is everywhere in the sales process. And everyone listening to this, running a sales team or a business, you got some sort of sales funnel, right? So use the book in that sales funnel, either to get cheaper and better leads, to get people, the way I use it is to get registrants for webinars, which is a key sales mechanism, and get people to show up and stay to the end for those webinars and then get a free book, right? And then all throughout that process though. And so the root word of authority is author. So when you become an author, you become an authority, right, in the mind of your prospects and customers. So it's an instant differentiator, which helps you close more deals and then get more referrals. And so kind of what I mentioned earlier is, what I recommend people do is we've got a URL on our site. It's our URL /friend. Anyone can replicate this. And so you just say to our customers, hey, anytime you run into anyone who wants to write a book, just send them here, or you can just put in their information. We'll send them a copy of my book for free, and we'll tell you that, we'll tell them that you sent it, right? And so it's just people don't often go around and hand out business cards and say, hey, you should work with Chandler, but they would say, hey, you should check out this blog. I think it'll be helpful. And so it just makes referrals easier. It makes sales easier. We give the book away everywhere for free, the audio book for free. And so we have hundreds, if not thousands of leads every single month that are free leads, or in a lot of cases, we're getting paid for leads that come from the book. I go around and speak at conferences a lot. We'll bring a few hundred books, give those away for free, walk out with hundreds of leads, and typically somewhere between 50 to 100 grand plus in sales on the spot from any speaking gig that I do or my speaking team does, all from the book, right? And so those are just a bunch of ways that we practically do it. And if I know you said there's a lot of B2B sales leaders that listen to this podcast and B2B entrepreneurs, I'd say, okay, you've got probably a target market of buyers. And depending on your average order value, you can pay a lot to acquire a customer. So create a Dream 100 or Dream 500 best buyers and send every single one of them a physical copy of the book, right? And so it's just along with a note. And it's just, it's a way to stand out and spark sales conversations that you just couldn't otherwise do. But it also is a built-in reciprocity where you're giving something of high value for free. And it just helps the whole sales process. So I could speak on this for a really long time, but that's kind of the cliff notes.
Okay. Well, certainly I could speak from personal experience that giving away your books is huge. And not so much now, but certainly before COVID, when I would go and actually meet with a prospect and hand this person a copy of my book, it always just made everything so much easier.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I know, Chandler, you have a gift for our listeners. So tell us about your gift.
Yes, ma'am. I want to practice what I preach here, and I want to give away the audiobook to my new book published. So the book's called Publish: The Proven Path from Blank Page to 10,000 Copies Sold. It walks through the whole process. I figured since this is a podcast, there's probably a lot of people who like audio-based content. So I'll give you the audiobook. You can obviously buy it on Audible for, I don't even know, $15-20, or you can get it for free. And so I'd love to give you the audiobook. I know that Wendy mentioned we do add the link in the show notes where you can download it, listen to it, and get value from it.
Absolutely. As soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes. The link is there. Click on the link and download the book so that you can listen to it. I know that's what I'm going to be doing as soon as we finish recording this interview. And Chandler, people want to connect with you. How can they do that?
Yes, ma'am. Connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the main spot. I'm not a big social media guy, but I am over on LinkedIn. Or if you want to connect directly with my team, you can go to selfpublishing.com/apply. You can book a call with the team there, and we'd be happy to chat with you about your book.
Okay. So again, if you didn't have a chance to write that down, it's okay, because the link is in the show notes, Chandler's LinkedIn, and also the link to Chandler's website. It's all in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link, connect with Chandler. And so any final words of wisdom, Chandler, for any of our listeners that are thinking, well, yeah, maybe I could write a book. Maybe it would help my business.
Start. Yeah. I mean, that would be my final thought is there's so many people that know they want to do it, but they say maybe someday and maybe next year. And there's never a perfect time to do it. It's never going to be convenient. There's never going to, I think a lot of times people think, hey, there's going to be a time where I've got no job, no kids, no business. I'm going to lock myself in a writer's cabin and that's when I'm going to do it. It's just not going to happen, right? You got to get started before you're ready. It is an investment of time, money, and energy, but it is one of the best investments I believe that you can make. And you create this asset that lives forever, that grows your business. So if you're thinking about doing it, just start with that mind map exercise I recommended earlier on the podcast. See what you come up with and keep building from there.
Okay, say it again. It's important. Say the mind map again. Start with the mind map.
I'll admit that. So the mind map, 15 minutes, put it on the clock right now. Brainstorm all the ideas you have around this topic. What are the broken record conversations that you have? What are the stories that you have, the lessons that you've learned? Take 15 minutes right now and let's make some progress on your butt.
Start. You heard it here first. Start. So thank you so much, Chandler. This was great. Would you put your hand over your heart and promise me you'll come back?
All right. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
All things publishing.
Let's do it. Thank you, Wendy.
Okay. So, and thank you all to our listeners. You've been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders with my special guest, Chandler Bolt, who is the CEO of selfpublishing.com. And if you have found value in listening to today's podcast, then please think about one business owner, one entrepreneur, one president, CEO, sales leader, somebody that you know that you think might also find value in listening to this podcast. And please do share the link with them. And until we meet again, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, really large bills.
You've been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. Be sure to follow so that you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review and be sure to share it with your friends. Tune in every week for more exciting insights and wisdom on transforming sales. And until next time, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, very large bills.